It's not like you don't get angry in a fight.
Anger can be a weapon. If you control it, use it. You clearly cannot.
Kratos. This big guy's made a handful of rankings in WatchMojo's top 10s, from the most powerful video game characters, most violent psychopaths, and probably most importantly, he topped our list of the top 10 angriest video game characters. Heck, we even made lists solely based on the bad shit that he's done alone. What can we say? Violence is popular on YouTube. But now in 2018, it seems that he's turning over a new leaf and trying to start anew with his young son. Does this new direction bring the series to new heights, or does it bring heresy to this demigod's name? Welcome to Mojo Plays, and this is our review of the 2018 version of God of wait a second, why is Kratos hugging a tree? Before we begin, be sure to subscribe to Mojo Plays and click on the links in the description to vote on upcoming content. Oh, okay, never mind. Obviously, the most significant change in tone for this new entry in the series comes with its story. It's been many years since Kratos slaughtered the Greek pantheon and left civilization in ruins. And now he's fled to the Norse lands of Midgar, where he has since remarried and had a son named Atreus. Kratos, however, hasn't told his son about his true nature and atrocities, and it's clear throughout the game that this secret still haunts him. Nevertheless, with the death of his wife, Kratos and Atreus are determined to fulfill her final wish, spreading her ashes from the highest peak of the Nordic realms, despite Atreus not being ready for such a journey.
Prove me wrong.
Yes, sir.
As you could probably tell, the story has a strong underlying theme of father-son bonding, and the challenges that fatherhood brings with it. The careful balance of letting his son learn and grow, while also shielding him from that which he is not prepared for, is a balancing act that's at play through most of the game. All the while, their relationship evolves and develops with both interesting, heartfelt, and at times heartbreaking moments. There are a few plot points that are left hanging, obviously in favor of a sequel that you know is coming by now, but the ending there is here, in this game, does conclude in a very satisfying way.
Until our journey is over, one of us must remain focused. Do not mistake my silence for lack of grief.
Kratos this time is played by Christopher Judge, best known as playing Teal'c from Stargate SG-1.
Indeed.
His performance brings a very remorseful yet steadfast tone to the character, instead of the rage-induced monster we saw in previous titles, while still delivering a commanding presence. There are a couple of times when his performance does start to sound and feel a bit similar, particularly in the way that he delivers some of his short response lines.
We will see soon enough.
The game's progression, at least for the first few hours, starts off very similar to previous Sony first-party titles, most notably Uncharted. At first, you're going down a pretty linear path, having to fight waves of enemies along the way, interspersed with a bit of climbing or light puzzle solving. By the way, more often than not, this involves Kratos throwing his axe at something. While this might initially irk some players to whom the word linearity is a dirty word, fear not, because at about 3 or 4 hours in, the world starts to open up into a much wider experience.
There's a shipwreck way over there. See that? And there's a statue of Thor.
It's not fully open world, but rather, think of the map in the shape of a giant mutant spider. Just go with me here. At the center of the map is a giant lake that acts like a hub world, and along its shoreline, there are multiple different routes you can take that lead to different areas. While you're free to explore a lot of these different regions, there are some sections that are blocked off until you progress further into the story. Fear not though, because doing a bit of sidetracking does offer its own unique rewards, usually in the form of rare items or armor. There's a few other secrets to this world that we won't spoil here, but rest assured that this game does find unique and interesting ways to change up the environments.
Thankfully, it's no longer underwater.
The real highlight, though, is the combat. And while the game has changed its pace a bit by having an axe as your standard weapon, the series really hasn't lost its fast, frenetic action. Battles feel very rewarding and satisfying, as you're given a large variety of abilities to take down your opponents. For example, you can throw your ice axe into one guy's face to freeze him while you take down another with your bare hands. You can also use an assortment of different secret abilities you can obtain throughout your adventure, each of which provides a unique attack or a certain area of effect for crowd control that keeps things from getting stale. That said, enemies are not pushovers, and you will die quite a bit if you're not careful. So while at times you can probably get away with a bit of button mashing, you've still really gotta pay attention. That said, there's very little consequence for dying, considering the game's pretty forgiving checkpoint system, and thankfully there's not much downtime between reloads either. Aside from your axe, there is one other weapon in the game that changes the combat formula, and while we're not going to say what it is here, it's just really awesome to use.
That's over.
There's also plenty to get out of the game's progression system too, thanks to a wide variety of gear options and skill trees that allow both Kratos and Atreus to unlock new abilities. Yet the moves are also cleverly designed so they don't feel too overpowered. Plus, all of your stats and level are tied to your gear, and you can either continuously craft stronger armor at the many blacksmith dwarf outposts, or make frequent upgrades to the current gear that you've got. Naturally, the strongest items require the rarest elements to obtain, so while it is possible to simply stay put and grind for XP, you'll really need to venture out more and more if you want to truly strengthen your character. And hey, all of this without the need for any sort of microtransaction system. How about that? Atreus is actually also a very useful AI companion, both inside and outside of combat. During combat, he has a bow which he can use to cause plink damage or distract opponents, and he can also climb atop of them in order to give you an opening. He's not immune to danger though. Enemies can also hold him down, but thankfully the developers made the very wise choice to have these moments happen rarely. It's honestly a really good balance because he takes care of himself in battle, but he doesn't come off as an invincible ghost either, making Atreus, honestly, one of the best AI companions we've seen in gaming.
That's what you get!
Boy,
However, gotta say not everything in the combat is smooth sailing. You've probably heard by now that Santa Monica Studios made the admittedly brilliant choice to have the game play out with no cuts in the camera work, making the whole game play as one fluid shot. This is great 95% of the time, but when you've got a load of enemies on the battlefield and they're all trying to pull your guts out, the camera can be a bit of a nuisance. The game tries to compensate for the new low angle and wider blind spot by having Atreus verbally alert you to danger, but sometimes his alerts are kind of obtuse and it's hard to hear over the combat. There's also a warning marker that circles Kratos at crucial times too, but it's also often hard to judge the direction correctly. Lastly, there's also a distinct lack in enemy variety, with some enemies being the same variation only with different elemental abilities, and nowhere is this more painfully felt than in the boss fights. A lot of the bosses seem like reskins here, though maybe with one or two unique abilities, but for the most part they feel kinda repetitive. There are definitely a handful of unique boss fights in the game too, but these are kind of a mixed bag. Granted, there are a few edge-of-your-seat battles, especially with the post-game bosses, but aside from a few exceptions, the boss patterns are pretty easy to read, and they don't really put up as much of a fight as we'd have hoped. The final boss in particular is kind of a letdown, since it's a character you've already faced, and they only have minor changes to their attack pattern, but what are you gonna do?
When Odin sent me here, I just needed answers, but you had to act all proud.
As for the amount of time you're gonna get out of the game, at most you're looking at about 20 to 25 hours to get the story mode done. Though, thankfully God of War does offer a decent amount of post-game content, from very challenging side missions to vast amounts of collectibles scattered throughout the world. Santa Monica Studios certainly didn't cut corners with the side quests too, as each of them come with their own unique side stories to explore, so you can probably double that playtime amount just on your first playthrough, not to mention if you want to come back for more at a higher difficulty. It looks visually spectacular too, thanks to some very nice attention to detail moments scattered throughout the world, setting it shoulder to shoulder against some of the PlayStation 4's great exclusives. Plus, aside from a few questionable animations and blink and you'll miss it frame rate dips, we barely ran into any glitches worth mentioning. The only other gripe we have about the game are the menus, particularly the really tiny text size. We played the game in 1080p, so if you're on a 4K display this might not be an issue, but if you're playing on a small monitor, it can be kinda difficult to get through some of the menus. Fortunately, the game's director has acknowledged this problem, so hopefully we'll see it fixed in the future.
I know you're a god. Not of this realm, but there's no mistaking it.
I'm sorry.
do not be sorry. Be better.
Thanks to its strong narrative, fun as hell gameplay, and great amount of content, God of War 2018 certainly makes the case to be among the top games of 2018. It has issues at times, yeah. But the overall package here is splendid, and it does a great job of catering to both story-focused gamers and gameplay-focused gamers. Fans of the classic series will also find plenty of enjoyment and nostalgic moments to be had. But if you've never played a God of War game before, there's really no better time to jump in and get your hands dirty.
What does it say?
The runes symbolize the three Nornir,
Nornir,
the Fates.
the Fates. No good comes from them.
Okay.
Thanks for watching Mojo Plays. Be sure to subscribe and click on the link in the description below to check out our suggestion page and vote on what content you'd like to see us cover next.